Comics of the New Europe addresses a gap in current comics scholarship. When you think about a survey of world comics or global comics, this is generally reduced to three areas: Franco-Belgian comics, Anglophone comics, and manga. Even a category like European comics tends to be conflated with Franco-Belgian comics and Anglophone comics. Unfortunately, this leaves out dozens of other European countries that are deserving of attention and have thriving comics cultures. In this book, we're interested in countries that have traditionally been left out of surveys of global comics, and particularly countries that have entered the European Union since the year 2000 or share a common history of surviving World War II and communist governments. So, for example, we have a section on the former East Germany, one on the Czech Republic and Slovakia. We also cover Hungary, Romania, Poland, Ukraine, and the former Yugoslavia. And all of these countries have very different histories of comics, but what we discovered is that there are a number of transnational connections among them. Some of the themes that come up repeatedly are trauma, nostalgia, autobiography, and gender. In the first chapter in this section, Czech scholar Pavel Korzinek examines the nostalgia in the Czech Republic post-89. In particular, he analyzes Pavel Čech's works, in which Pavel Čech evokes a kind of nostalgia for a childhood canon of comics and adventure stories from the 1970s and 1980s. In the second chapter, I examine the comics of Wojciech Maszek, and I look at the way in which he cites avant-garde movements like Surrealism and Dada, and how formally complex his book is. Despite the fact that it has many layers and many different narratives, it's quite witty and engaging. And for the third chapter, Martin Foret looks at the comics of Branko Jelinek, the author of the Oscar Ed series. The Oscar Ed comics are about a very dark kind of psychological mood in which the main character never knows quite what is real and what is not real. And Jelinek uses an aesthetic that is very much influenced by Japanese manga, like Otomo's Akira, for example. So in these three chapters, we look at different approaches to Czech comics and some of the major creators from the so-called Generation Zero post-2000 in the Czech Republic. I discovered Wojciech Maszek's works over 10 years ago when I picked up the Monster Cabaret trilogy in the Gregor Samsa bookstore in Lucerna's Arcade in Prague. And at the time, I didn't realize how apt that was because, of course, the Monster Cabaret series is full of references to Kafka, a kind of theater of the absurd, many layers and references to film, surrealism, Dada, all of these different pieces coming together. The main plot line concerns a mad scientist who wants to take people's noses and pull them into these kind of grotesque trunks. This becomes a metaphor for indoctrination. And whether we're talking about his fictional works or his nonfiction works, he seems to be working through and meditating on the themes of monstrosity, identity, insiders, outsiders, spies, and betrayal. And I find his work shockingly relevant even today, even when his stories are set in the past. And I think he's an author that is worth looking out for and deserves a greater audience.